Another one of those weeks where you think, who would want to be an FPL content creator? Another game week right up, another waiver deadline. Let's get right into it. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another game week preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems and general Premier League chat ahead of game week 31. Now, game week 30 hasn't quite finished at the time of recording with Chelsea versus Spurs later today. It means we won't have much info on the way of injuries from the midweek games. There have been a few press conferences today which haven't really given us a huge amount of info to go on, but yeah, it means we won't have all the info we need before the waivers process tomorrow, Friday, 11 a.m. at their fairly standard time ahead of the Saturday lunchtime kickoff. This week also marks the last of 2 game weeks within a week. After this, we'll have fairly conventional week-to-week waivers. There will be lots of double game week fixtures put in here and there, but the actual waiver deadlines will still be at their relatively conventional times. It just means that when we're doing some of our game week previews, there will likely be some games that have yet to play because of their being shoved in sort of Wednesday and Thursday night. So speaking of double game weeks, we just got confirmation around an hour or two ago that we've got a couple of added fixtures into game week 33, Villa against City and Palace against Arsenal. They'll be added into the midweek space after the normal round of Game Week 33 games. These games have been brought forward from Game Week 34 due to the FA Cup semi-finals, which means all of those teams will blank in Game Week 34. It does mean you can sort of pile into them a little bit, knowing that you can then drop them again in Game Week 34 for somebody else that you want. Arsenal are probably the most obvious winners here, as if we look at their next 3 game weeks, they go away to Everton this weekend and a home game against Brentford, and their double is Ipswich and Palace. City are the other obvious one to look at here. They go away to United this weekend, then Palace at home, and then their double is Everton and Aston Villa. As ever, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe if this is your first time here and you don't want to miss out on any future episodes as they drop, particularly as we're heading towards the summer when we'll have lots of stuff, as we usually do, ready for the next round of draft days. Now, I'm recording this episode on Thursday, the 3rd of April. So as I said, any team news, injury developments and press conference info are up to date as of now, which is about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And of course, subject to change. There's not a lot of time, so let's get straight into things. So, a reminder, the waiver deadline will be 11 a.m. on Friday the 4th of April ahead of the main game deadline, 11 a.m. on Saturday morning. That's British summer time, obviously regular times depending on where you're listening from. In terms of last week's waivers, the main players coming into your teams, we had Trippier at the top, Richards, Byrne, Livramento, Marino, Harvey Barnes, Stupinan, Lacroix, Bruno Guimaraes and Quansah. A couple of misses there. Quansah obviously didn't start. Richards was a kind of a late touted injury and he missed out. But interestingly, of those top 10 there, 5 of them are Newcastle players. The players making their way were Noneri, that was probably a bad drop, Branthwaite, Tavernier, Mikolenko, De Ligt, Semedo, Calafiore, Totti, O'Brien and Mazraoui. A couple of the Wolves defenders there who picked up a clean sheet, but otherwise a fairly safe set of drops there. In terms of key injuries and suspensions, probably one of the most last-minute bits of news I saw literally as I was about to click record. I already had Gabriel on the slide, but we just had official confirmation from Arsenal that Gabriel's season is over. His hamstring injury will require surgery, so I think similar timeline to Bukayo Saka, but obviously there is just not enough runway left for him to be able to make a return before May. So unfortunate one, we can then look at a replacement option shortly. The other one was Isak, who went off with a bit of a groin niggle. It looked like it was mainly precautionary. If there's any sniff that that's causing them a problem at the weekend, then I'm sure he will get a rest, and we'll discuss that a bit later too. Into the main picks then. And I've got Livramento right at the top. His ownership crept up even further to 79% ahead of the last round of waivers, as we just saw on the waiver watch. They have got a game away at Leicester this weekend, which is very nice on paper. I've mainly kept Livramento here as a placeholder for Newcastle in general. We just saw very popular in the waivers, but if there are still any of their regulars floating around in your waiver pile, then pick them up. And if they are being offered in trades, then look at those deals with very keen interest. Next one on the list is Jakub Kiwior for Arsenal. Ownership just outside hidden gem territory at 11%. That hasn't really moved. I suspect for the more engaged leagues that ownership will be much lower. As I said, very nice little set of fixtures over the next 3 game weeks. 4 games in that time with the new double in game week 33. He is seemingly going to be the main beneficiary of Gabriel's hamstring injury. And I say, a game at Goodison Park is one that we will be looking at as a very good chance for an Arsenal clean sheet anyway. We'll have to see how much his presence really destabilises that defensive unit, but I think still a good option anyway. Especially if your opponent that you're coming up against in a head-to-head league this weekend has an Arsenal defender, a nice, easy way to cover off. When I first put Kiwior on here, I was kind of looking at him as maybe someone we can just rely on for the 2 to 3 weeks. There are other options here. Ben White could slot in at a right-sided centre-back and move Saliba over. We've seen Calafiori play a little bit at left centre-back, but he's injured at the moment. So for now, I think Kiwior's fairly safe to directly deputise for Gabriel. Don't overthink it. Yeah, a good one to pick up, and I'm sure will be very, very popular on the waivers this weekend. And then the last one on the list is Udogie for Spurs, a pure fixture pick with a home game against Southampton. I don't think that currently Udogie gets into the best Spurs 11, so I would now assume he comes in for that league game against Southampton ahead of the more important European fixture on Thursday. Into the midfielders, and again, Joel Linton is left there as a placeholder, just as a reminder. There should be quite a few Joel Lintons kicking around waiver piles, and I still think he's a good pickup, even though it was Tonali that got quite a fortunate winning goal yesterday. So, Joel Linton I still like. Marino, I said the other day, would be my top waiver pickup if you had the option there, and owners were rewarded with a goal and 10 FPL points. Arsenal have more available options now in their front line, but given how he's performed, I don't see why he shouldn't continue as the number 9. Like a lot of teams, Arsenal have 2 huge European games coming up, so we should expect some rotation at the weekend. If Marino doesn't play, then in a way that probably makes it quite a good sign for owners, because it means that he is being looked at as someone they don't want to risk and someone who's currently first 11, which is where I think he would be for me. And then in a similar vein to Udogie, because of that home game against Southampton, we've got another few Spurs players to discuss. The first one is Brennan Johnson. Now, his ownership is high, 93%, and I'm obviously prepping this before knowing the Spurs starting 11 against Chelsea tonight, but I'm fairly comfortable with the logic that Brennan Johnson probably doesn't get into the best Spurs 11 right now, so I'm expecting the best 11 to play tonight, or as close to that as we can, against Chelsea. Still not really sure what's going to go on with the defenders, with then a lot of the backups coming in to play the league game against Southampton at the weekend. This provides an opportunity for several players with low ownership. Johnson isn't technically one of those. His ownership in 10-team leagues, as I said, is clinging to very high heights despite a dip to around 75% in game week 25. But I know from last week that his ownership in the more engaged leagues did take a drop, so he may be there for a few of you Kinos listening, and an excellent one-week punt for those in sort of smaller 6 to 8 team leagues if he was there in your waiver pile. Tell is the other one I've listed here. Far more availability here. He's free in more than 80% of waiver piles in 10-team leagues, and he's one I'm fairly confident will start against Southampton. I don't think he'll play against Chelsea tonight, or if he does, it will be off the bench. And again, this is a pure fixture pickup. Southampton did put on a decent display last night for 90 minutes against Crystal Palace, but couldn't sustain it into injury time and ended up falling to a draw. They've definitely got some players who can get in behind the Spurs defence themselves, but really any combination of the Spurs front 3 should be looking at this game and licking their lips. And then finally, just to firmly hammer off that point, is Richarlison. And, a forward with 53% ownership is always one to consider if we think they're going to start, particularly if we think they're going to start a game against Southampton. Like the others, he's not in the best 11. I fully expect him to maybe come on for 10 minutes at the end of the Chelsea game tonight, depending on the game state, and can see him getting his first league start for a little while against Southampton at the weekend. I think if we do see Richarlison with a little showing off the bench tonight, I'd be more than 80% confident that he does start for the league game at the weekend. Next is Evan Ferguson for West Ham. He got his first Premier League start for West Ham, but did not go very well. If you saw the halftime sub and wondered about an injury, there wasn't one. It was a good old-fashioned halftime hook, due to essentially a very big miss in the first half from a Bowen cutback, which I think the XG on that chance was something like 0.7, but Don't quote me on it because I only looked at it last night. It's annoying because if he scores that chance, I think everyone's clamouring for Ferguson. He's probably going to get a good run in the team, and it's another starting striker option for us. But I'm very doubtful that performance is going to convert into starts. The fact that he did start, though, means he has to be an option for those in sort of dire need of a striker. But don't go dropping someone who is finding regular minutes for him. We'll have to see how he does at the weekend. I would expect him to come off the bench again. And then finally, it's Callum Wilson. Obviously, Isak came off, as I said, just after the hour mark on Wednesday and was replaced directly by Callum Wilson. The top 4 race remains very much in Newcastle's hands, and they will not want to risk losing Isak for a chunk of the remaining game weeks. Newcastle now have 3 Premier League games coming up between the 7th and the 16th of April, so it seems fair to expect that we'd have seen a bit of Wilson anyway, even if Isak was fit. Of all these mediocre and opportunistic striker options to fill a short-term gap, Wilson is the one that I would be aiming for. As ever, comment below any players that I haven't mentioned that you're interested in this week, particularly ones with low ownership, and we can chat about them in the comments. But let's move forward into hidden gems. Not many to go through here. In defence is Ben Davies. Again, purely speculative for that home game against Southampton. I expect Van de Ven will not be risked for that game, which leaves the door open for Davies to play at left centre-back. I think it will be Davies because I think Archie Gray will likely cover Pedro Porro at right back. And then next is Toffolo, again speculative and with a less attractive fixture on paper, but a home game against Everton next week too. It is speculative because Forest have other options and other ways to line up. I should have added actually in the injury section that Ola Aina came off early in the first half on Tuesday night, and it looks like he could be out for a couple of weeks at least, so we haven't got any firm news on that yet. The easiest like-for-like replacement would be Toffolo to come in. Williams would move back over to right back with Toffolo at left back, but they say they could bring Morato in and use one of their midfielders like Elliot Anderson as a left wing back. So it's not 100% guaranteed, but I think definitely for those bigger leagues, given his ownership is near universal, a decent one to pick up. Into midfield, again, seems like he's just a permanent fixture on the podcast list. He's dropped down into hidden gem territory because ownership dropped by about 5% this week, which is interesting. He got expected goal involvements from the game last night against West Ham of around 0.7. That might be where I got the 0.7 from for that chance for Evan Ferguson, so I'll maybe let him off. And there was a big standout chance where he struck the crossbar, had a pretty good game overall. Should continue to start and should get more chances away at Ipswich at the weekend. And then finally, Nkizio was our most hidden gem pick on the last pod, popped up with an assist for the first goal for a very helpful 5-pointer. Ownership was generally down, so if he missed out on points there, Wolves at home should provide Ipswich with opportunities to score. I'm expecting a score draw here and actually quite a good game, I think. And finally, the most hidden gem pick for this week is Nico O'Reilly from Manchester City. Just 2% rostered in 16-team leagues. Their ownership did creep up this week, so there were some that had 9 in after a very impressive FA Cup substitute display against Bournemouth at the weekend. First Premier League start in Game Week 30. Started at left back, which is where he came on to play in that FA Cup game. And City played well again last night. Obviously got a clean sheet. The problem here is that O'Reilly is listed as a midfielder. So it's kind of like Lewis Skelly for Arsenal in that if he was a defender, his ownership would be through the roof. But obviously he doesn't get the clean sheet points in the same way that the others do. That's the main thing holding back O'Reilly. But we have seen him get very, very far forward and progressive. So if he does continue to play, I think there is a good chance he chips in with a few attacking returns before the season is over. Away to Old Trafford, I wonder if they go with a more sure and steady Vardiol at left back. Following that, Crystal Palace at home, and then they've got that double game week, as I said, of Everton and Aston Villa now. A good one. And I say we're talking about 16-team leagues here, so this is where you really do want to take a punt on some of these guys. And then a little bonus slide that I will whiz through pretty quickly, which I'm calling late season drops. So obviously, as I always say, context is key in draft FPL. This doesn't mean that you take this as, prescribed advice that you don't deviate from. This will vary hugely depending on the size of your league. In fact, for most of these, if you're in a league of 12 plus, will not apply to you. This is mainly aimed at those in more conventionally sized leagues. Also, it doesn't mean you have to drop them, but I think if you're looking at your team, if you're looking at a player in the waiver pile that you would like to bring in, if there's a midfielder there that you'd like to bring in, but you're looking at your 5 mids and just thinking these are all too good to drop. At this stage in the season, with just a handful of games left, you can make harsher choices with your players, knowing that they're not going to hurt you if the player at the bottom of the league picks them up now. So yeah, just a few names as food for thought. Now, first one is Munoz, who you'll know I've been a big fan of. And in fact, I have him in both of my main draft FPL teams this year. The problem is Palace have a pretty dreadful run of fixtures. He could be one maybe more for trading out, but, there's only so far really you can sell a Palace defender in a trade. It's hard to see many clean sheets, as said, on the calendar. So he will be fully reliant on his trickle of attacking returns now. Now, obviously, the key thing here is that Palace have 2 double game weeks in a row. But within those 2 doubles, they have away trips to Manchester City, Newcastle and Arsenal. So nothing special. Larger leagues would certainly be better off holding, as I said anyway, even if you're just getting a couple of 2-pointers each game. I know lots of people will still surge for the Palace defenders and already have done because of that looming double game week, and now it's a double game week. But for me, Newcastle are head and shoulders above them, and a lot of those Newcastle players could outscore the Palace defenders after just one of the games in the double. Next on the list is Odegaard, just pure lack of form, 3 returns from his last 16 Premier League games. Minutes are no excuse, and the team are playing well, even with other injuries. He's getting the underlying stats, but they don't pay the bills for draft managers. Vardy is another one, very much due to lack of form. 2 returns from the last 12 Premier League games. Minutes have not been a problem, and he's remained relatively injury-free. But Leicester really are limping to the finish line now. I say this is really one for the smaller leagues because most of us, and I'm talking myself included, who have Vardy in a 9-team league, do not really have anyone to replace him with. Next is Robinson for Fulham, and I've also got Iwobi on there too. The fixtures are pretty rough for Fulham, so not really going to have many clean sheets coming. For Robinson in particular, his 10 assists this season have come from an expected assist tally of just under 4, so it was never going to be sustainable, and I would not be precious about dropping him if you've got your eye on someone else. Same thing with Iwobi, just 3 attacking returns in the last 16 Premier League appearances, very much feast or famine for him. Then we got Doku for Manchester City, very much a flat track bully, seems to do nothing against half-decent teams. Just 3 returns since Christmas, and all 3 of those came from games against Everton and Ipswich, and you might recall that Ipswich game was when Manchester City smashed them 6-0. We've also got his teammate on there, Kevin De Bruyne. 3.8 FPL points per appearance this season is well off what we'd expect from De Bruyne. The minutes aren't there, the form isn't there, and at this stage of the season, I think you can probably do better. And then finally, another Draft FC old favourite is Mohamed Kudus. Just 1 attacking return from 12 Premier League starts now is not good enough and needs to be made way for someone with a lot more upside going down the stretch of the season. Predicted lineups have been updated. I do expect there to be a lot of rotation, probably more rotation than I factored into my lineups at the moment due to the tight turnaround and also due to the fact there are still quite a few teams with very important European fixtures coming up. So yeah, I think there'll be some surprising ones. I've tried to factor as many of those in as I can in the predictions, but it could be a bad one for me in terms of hit and miss. So that is it for this episode. Another reminder, the waiver deadline will be at the usual time of 11 a.m. Friday, UK British summertime, ahead of a normal gaming deadline, 11 a.m. on Saturday morning, ahead of the Saturday lunchtime kickoff. Another reminder to click the thumbs up button, click the subscribe button, and if you're listening on the podcast audio, give us a follow on whichever platform you're listening on so you don't miss out and get notified when future episodes drop. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to steer you towards draftfc.co.uk if you haven't been there before. You can sign up there for lots of exclusive stats and graphs and charts and features you won't find anywhere else, all dedicated to your draft FPL teams on official FPL, that is. And anyone that does become a signed up member will also get access to our exclusive Discord community where you'll get in there with myself and all of the other Draft FC members to share and gain draft FPL knowledge. So as good a reason to sign up as any. Anyway, I'll leave things there because of the turnaround. Don't forget your waivers. Pencil them in as soon as you hear this because there really aren't many hours to go. You'll watch the game tonight. You'll go to sleep. You'll wake up, go to work, and before you know it, you've missed the deadline. So do it now and you'll be just fine. So best of luck for your upcoming matchups. Hope you get the points that you need. And until next time, stay shook.